Hello friends, most welcome once again to online lectures on soft skills. In the previous lectures, you have been listening to the various forms of speaking. As you well remember, you have learnt how to speak on various occasions, whether it is to participate in a group discussion or to give an individual presentation or to give speeches for various occasions depending upon the need, the necessity, the demand and all. And today we are going to talk about one more significant speaking opportunity, and that is interviews. The very word interviews, many of you, when you come across such a word, you have different sorts of inhibitions. But then one thing is certain, that all of us have to appear at interviews. Now, those of you who are yet to get a job, they might be thinking how to succeed in an interview. And those who are in jobs already, they might be waiting for new positions, but yet they will also have to face interviews. Even when you become a part of the organization or workplace, you have to appear at different sorts of interviews. And all these sorts of interviews have different purposes also. In your own life also, even in your private lives, social lives, you have to appear at interviews, right from a child's admission to a good school to an appointment either in a hospital or in a hostel, or for some other occasions also you have to appear at interviews. Now, those youngsters who are yet to appear at the interviews, they might be feeling at times some amount of fear, because the name interview itself sends in your body a sort of fright or fear, and this fear at times also makes you nervous. We have already talked a lot about nervousness, but here we will see in the lectures that will follow, we actually want to provide you with all sorts of preparations so that when the time for the interview comes, you never feel panicky, you never feel nervous. Let us try to understand what are interviews and what are actually the expectations in an interview. Because as I said, interviews are not confined only to jobs or to admissions, but then there are various occasions which necessitate an interview. So, if you know clearly what interviews are and you also know the expectations of interviews, you will be better prepared and armed so that you can face the volley of questions which are aimed at knowing you. Now, what sort of skills are required in an interview? But before that, let us try to understand what is an interview. This term interview comes from a French word which is interview, or sometimes inter and view. Even if the English words you try to divide, this is interview. So, this French word actually means the site between. So, interview means the site between. Interview actually means to see the other person. Now, an interview is actually a sort of face to face, if you might have heard from others, it is actually a face to face communication. Most of the time this is oral. The people who are interviewing you, meaning thereby the interviewers, people who are appearing at interview, they will be called interviewee, and those who are taking your interview, they will be called interviewer. Now, an interview is an oral tool to test a candidate's traits, qualities for different purposes. Now, these purposes will vary according to the occasion, according to the need. Now, what are the requisites of an interview? First is that this once again is a part of speaking skills, because orality is involved. But with orality, even though when you appear at an interview you speak, but at the same time you have to demonstrate, you have to reflect your non-verbal skills also. In every speaking situation, as you might have found, whether it is a group discussion or a speech or a presentation, it is actually a mingling of both verbal and non-verbal. So, orality is involved, but at the same time this orality is coupled with your non-verbal skills. Now, let us have some broader view. As Pauline V. Young says, an interview may be regarded as a systematic method. Now, it is very systematic. You will see how stepwise an interview can become a systematic method. It is not only the test of your oral skills, but there are many other skills, because when the interview is held, you are, or the interviewer is seeing you, but when he sees you, he not only sees you or he not only examines you from your face, but he actually examines you mentally. It is not that whatever is written on your face, but then there are different methods, different ways to judge, because through an interview the interviewers, they actually try to enter more or less imaginatively into the inner life of comparative strangers. Now, when we say comparative strangers, because you know, when the term interview, you can ask one question, why, despite the fact that you know your subject matter well, if it is a job interview, why do you feel nervous? You feel nervous, again we will go back and say, you feel nervous because you feel that the people who are going to interview you, they are strangers, and when you are to communicate with a stranger, psychologically you feel frightened. So, an interviewer tries to enter your inner life, fine, and when he tries to do that, he is actually having an aim to understand, to examine so many things. Now, let us talk about the types of the interview. Now, if an interview is a sight between, if it is a sight between, you might be thinking, is it between two people? Yes. If it is an interview, naturally some other person will try to examine you, but then it is not essential that only two people are involved. So, when two people are involved, we already say one is an interviewee and the other is an interviewer. But then depending upon the types of interview, the number of persons changes. So, maybe if it is a job interview, even in job interviews also there are several categories, several rounds. We are living in a digital age. Today, to conduct interviews physically sometimes becomes very difficult. That is why you might feel at times we have telephonic interviews. If I refer to one of my previous lectures where while talking about report writing, we had discussed that one method of data collection is also through telephonic interview. Now, such an interview can be called a sort of information gathering interview, information gathering. So, depending upon the purpose, interviews may be different. So, if we are talking about a job interview, it will be different, but there are situations when you have to have a sort of information interview. For example, when you are trying to collect data and you have less amount of time, but remember there are several factors involved into it. One is that you have very little amount of time and you want to collect the information. So, what you do is you actually conduct a telephonic interview. Nowadays, since there are so many facilities available because of the digitalization, people can have interviews over Skype, and that has become very common. Now, it has its advantage as well as disadvantage also, we will see later. Then apart from informative interview, we can also have a persuasive interview. Now, see what is persuasive interview? The term persuasion is involved in it. Suppose you are actually trying to have a deal, and in order to have a deal, there are some people who in this deal, they are not ready to understand. So, some way or the other you try to persuade them. That can be done either telephonically also or physically also. Sometimes you will find there are certain miscommunications, there are certain situations where you need to convince a person, and for that you need to persuade the person. Sometimes you actually believe that nothing wrong has been done, but yet there are certain allegations or whatsoever. So, in such situations you actually have persuasive interview. These are not related to job interviews, but remember, once you are in job, there also you may have such a situation. For example, you have been given a responsibility in a job and you are not discharging your responsibility in the best possible manner. There are certain hindrances, there are certain impediments. So, the next person, I mean your boss, your leader, tries to persuade you. So, this is persuasive interview. Then in jobs also you will find that nowadays, since we have good many organizations and it has become a fashion among people, among employees to change their jobs. Now, changing jobs, that also require interviews. So, you appear at one interview just to get another job, but at the same time you are leaving your previous organization, and when you leave, some organizations have got a sort of facility of exit interviews. Now, what is this exit interviews? One employee who had been with one organization and is leaving the organization for whatever reason, but then there may be a possibility that this employee may be requested or asked to give an exit interview. Now, what is actually the basis, what is actually the reason for this exit interview? Good organizations want to understand if there are certain problems, or they also want to understand because one person who was already experienced and had been in the organization for so many years, so maybe his inputs while he is going, because when he is going he can always give some valuable inputs. So, for that this exit interview becomes very important, and organizations try to extract some very valid points in such interviews. These are called exit interviews. But do remember, if you are going to appear at an exit interviews, please see, since you are leaving the organizations, it is not that you will say certain bad things about the organization. If you have been in the organization for so long, you really know where are the gaps. Since you are already going, since you are already leaving the organization, you should tell the organization as to what can be done, at times even for retaining certain employees or even for bringing something new in the organization. So, this is, here is a chance that you can provide some inputs in an exit interview. Then is evaluation interview. You will find that at times certain new policies, certain new products being launched, being announced, sometimes some work, some project that is in progress, but for that you actually want a sort of periodic progress report sort of thing, which can also be given through evaluation interview. With such an interview, you are trying to evaluate, for example, how many months are needed, what are the difficulties. This is usually between two people who are one being at the top and the other being a part of it. So, this may be a sort of evaluation interview. Then at times you will find, you see, as I have been saying, that it is not that we only need jobs, we only require jobs. Organizations also require good people, they also are in search of good people. And when we are in an organization, because everywhere we have people, everywhere we have human beings, and it is actually at times it so happens that because of some incidents, because of some miscommunications, because of some sort of gaps, there arises a situation where some employee, sometimes because of a critical moment in the organization, as a result the morale of the employees at times goes down. So, for that we require a sort of counseling through which, through this interview of counseling, you might have found that when you were students in your school or colleges, if your performance was not well, you need to be sent to the counselor who would give you certain tips. So, through counseling we try to motivate the spirit, motivate the morale, we try to boost the morale of the employees. So, this is called counseling interview. Then we have conflict resolution, interviews also for conflict resolution. Two departments, nowadays nothing can be done in isolation. Sometimes you have to have a sort of communication between two departments and a project which is being run by two departments, two units. So, there are chances that there can be some amount of conflict between the two departments, and these conflicts can only be resolved when there is an interview, and for that both the parties also may be called, and somebody who is at the top slot may try to resolve the differences, and maybe that he can talk to both the parties individually and then try to bring something out finally. So, this is a conflict resolution interview. And then there is a sort of disciplinary interview. In such interviews, you see, sometimes as I have said that we are human beings, and there are times when things are not in our control and we commit certain mistakes, at times some mistakes that would cause loss to the organization or whatsoever. But in such a situation some action has to be taken, and for that also there is a sort of disciplinary committee, and this disciplinary committee calls for an interview, and through that interview they try to, in certain situations they call it a fact finding committee, and then based on that there are certain reports, recommendations whatsoever. So, this disciplinary committee tries to gather, extract the fact. Then there is termination interview, which is the worst. Some people, some employees unfortunately have to leave an organization before time. Regions may be varied, but even before the organizational heads, they provide them a chance, but before finally giving them the final go or giving them the final letter, they call for a termination interview where they try to understand things and all. Nowadays the terms are changing, even when you are leaving an organization, and they have termed a new word that is, which they call as golden handshake. They try to discuss things, and they finally they try to bid adieu to each other, they try to bid farewell to each other. So, these are the various forms of interview. Now, whatever be the form of the interview, whatever be the nature of the interview, as an interviewee, as a candidate, what should you do, my dear friends? How to face the test, how to face this acid test, rather I will call. The first is, in all these interviews, as I said in the beginning, you are required to speak, you are required to express your point of view, whether you are right or wrong or whatsoever, whether you are selected, rejected, dejected, objected, subjected, whatsoever, but at the same time you are to speak. So, now if you are to speak, naturally you require certain qualities. The first is confidence. Now, in all speaking situations, confidence is the first weapon that will help you. Now, how can you develop confidence? So, first is try to develop confidence. In order to develop confidence, you first have to understand the entire situation, the need of the interview, and when you understand the need of the interview and you are acquainted with, you are well versed with the information, that will give you the confidence. So, in order to have the confidence, you actually require information. Why this interview is there? why you have been called for the interview, whether it is for counseling or for the disciplinary committee or for whatever purpose. So, but try to gather the information. The same is true even in a job interview. When we shall be discussing about the job interview, we will see how you have to gather information. So, for all interviews, first is develop the confidence, and then you have to get yourself ready with the information. Again, something very important, because interviews, whenever we talk about interviews, the first thing that comes to your mind is not only the strange people, but there are strange questions. Questions may be from anywhere and everywhere. So, get ready for those questions. But sometimes, do you believe that you will be able to answer all the questions? Not at all. Not everyone can answer all the questions. So, in such a situation, what is expected of you is that you should make use of your intelligence. How can you have intelligence, of course, but then how can you reply intelligently? That is very important. So, for that, there have been several sessions we have been discussing. You need to practice listening. There are times when people are more excited and they are not ready even to listen to the entire question, and they start answering it. You never know what will be the other part of the question, and in such a situation you will fail, you will falter, and you will bring a sort of ill luck. So, what you should do is you should listen to the question very intelligently and you should answer them. So, you have to be a little bit of intelligent. Then, during the interview session, you will find not only the ambience and all, but then there may be different sort of people, and all these people are strangers. So, how to behave, how to act, how to show your behavior, because everyone, whether they ask question or not, they are interviewing you. They are entering into your inner psyche by the way you are responding. So, you have to deal with the interview very efficiently. Now, again, you should understand the need and the expectations of the interviewer. Now, what does the interviewer want? As a young man, who wants to touch the limit of the sky, you can anticipate all sorts of questions, meaning thereby you can think of all the questions that can be there, but for that you need to understand what is the purpose of this interview, why this interview has been called. And then what is of utmost importance is language. Sometimes it has been seen that questions are put in such a tricky manner that you can be bowled. They actually try to, in cricket's language, let me tell you, they try to throw yorkers, googlies at times, bouncers. Can you practice how to duck the bouncers, how to face the googlies, and how to counter the yorkers? This ability you have to develop, my dear friend, and that you can do only through effective use of language. How you should answer a particular question, it is not the time now that people should tell you, but you know well what actually are the expectations of the other person, and that is why when you speak, when you express, please choose a language that has formality and that has a sort of, no informal language can be used in an interview. Fine. So, there are times when people often say, I knew the question well, but I was not able to answer. Of course, you could have practiced how to answer questions. And remember, every individual has got certain strengths and certain weaknesses. Now, when you are going to prepare for your interview, you should, man never tries to estimate himself. The problem with all of us is that we are very selfish by nature, and we most of the time overestimate ourselves, or at times when you are low in spirits, you underestimate yourself, and there lies the problem. So, you should understand what are your strengths, in which area you are better, what are your weaknesses. Now, a clever person, what he will do is, he will actually try to present his weakness in such a manner that the weakness also becomes a merit. But for that you need experience. Your experienced friends who are in the organizations, they can tell you how it is to do that. Especially the novice ones, they are not in a position to know and to use their strengths and weaknesses. That is why the new people, they often, even when they appear at the interviews, in many interviews they fail. Let me give you a very small episode. One of my boys, one of the boys in my neighborhood, he had very good career. He had been appearing at several interviews, and I knew that he might have answered well, but then whenever he came, he was very happy, but when the results came out, he was very unhappy. Then one day I decided, let me offer him some help, and asked him the sort of questions which he was asked. And when I tried to analyze his answers, I could see that the boy had answered the questions not exactly up to the expectations of the interviewer. And then I told him certain tips which he utilized later, and after 2-3 months I could see he came one day and told me that he had got a job. Now, what are these things that we shall discuss in the next lecture when we talk about how to prepare for, because much of the guidance, much of the sort of steps that you can take, that is possible only when you are preparing for the interview. Now, here is an observation, let us see about the job interviews. You see, all of us are good. All of us have a sort of distinction in us. Let us try to feel ourselves that we have not been able to prove our mettle or to prove the fire that is in us. That is why John D. Singleton says, very often the difference between the person hired and the person rejected is not who is the better candidate, but who is rather better prepared for the interview. Now, a person reads for so many years and his entire learning is judged just in half an hour. So, you have to prepare for those half an hour. Of course, preparing for those half an hours may take so many months, but then it is only those who prepare for the interview, they only become successful. Careers can be made and lost at that point alone. So, what I need to say is, whatever be the nature of the interview, whatever be the purpose of the interview, but if you are going for a job interview, it is better that you get prepared. Now, before you get prepared, you should also understand the different stages of the interview. What is how interview can be understood as a process, because we have said that it is a sort of systematic process. Now, what happens? Those many of you who have been from good many colleges and have been fortunate enough to get campus placements, they are really thankful. But again, there are many people who are still waiting for jobs. And it is not only the technical institutes, there are other institutes also, and every now and then you find that the number of graduates, postgraduates, technically qualified, and all these people, the number is growing up like anything. That is why nowadays what is happening. So, unless and until you understand the different stages of interview, sometimes people say, I keep on applying but I do not get call letters. Fine. Some of them say, I get calls, but usually when I go for the interview, I am not able to face them, I am not able to prove my worth. So let us try to understand what are these stages. The first stage is, you see, because so many people are applying, thousands and thousands of candidates are there. So the first thing that the recruiters do is they screen their application. So screening of your application. Now screening, when they do the screening, they look at so many things, and half of your examination is done through that. Moreover, they also say that they receive a good number of CVs. So I'll tell you in a later lecture how it is to make a good CV, because as many people say they do not get a call. They do not get a call because they are not able to create, not able to prepare a saleable resume or a saleable CV. Because the recruiters, while they are going to screen, the first thing that they see is your CV or the curriculum vitae. And then, so first stage is screening. Through screening, they try to eliminate some of them. Even the other process is that through their CVs, the CVs that are very attractive and that have some worth in it, they are sent the calls, but the remaining ones are left. Then even if this after CVs are examined, then there are competency tests. Sometimes, you know, the number of people, as I said, the number of people is too many. So they try to, as you know, many of those who appear in different sorts of examinations, they will find that there are different stages. So in certain cases, they also provide you competency tests through which competency task they give you, and through which they are trying to eliminate. Sometimes they have psychological tests also. They put you under certain situations and they call a group of people, and they either give you a topic or a case or whatsoever. In certain organizations, they try to eliminate people or screen people through group discussions. We have already had so many lectures on all these. Sometimes they also try to negotiate, and through negotiation also some of the people are rejected or some of the accepted. Then even when all these things are done, they also try to, and you know, in many job interviews they have one interview which is very important, that is a stress interview. Now this stress interview, as you will find, this is very challenging, where, you know, some people who are trying to test you in a stressful situation, and they give you the situation and they raise the question like that, and at times you also feel embarrassed by the sort of questions or by the looks they are throwing at you. You know, at times the looks appears to be so gobbling, and even if they do not appear to be gobbling, the way the questions are put, you start feeling, you know, as if what will happen. As I had said in one of my lectures, you become so nervous that you start thinking perhaps the sky will fall down. And then when all these are over, there is another one, that is medical test. But this medical test is the last one, where when you have passed, when you have qualified for all these, then you go for the medical test. My dear friends, when you are going to prepare or think about the interview, that is why I say, time and again I have been saying that before you go for the interview, you have to prepare yourself mentally, because unless and until you are confident, you will not be able to participate in an interview. And when you go for that, first try to understand, because when you apply for a particular job, you also should know, and the general trend you can know by having a look at Times of India, Ascent, Employment News. There are several, you know, through company websites and all. You will find out that most of these recruiters, they try to observe 2 or 3 things very carefully. First is, they would like you or an employee to be a very good person. Now, how can they do that? They have their different ways to find out who is good among them, who is suitable, because they will finally select the candidate who is suitable, who is most suitable. And then since they are from the organizations, that they want that we should have a person who has got the competency of being an asset to the organization, and whether the person we are going to take is well informed and well rounded. So when I say well informed and well rounded, what I mean is whether the person has got a good personality or not. We have already had had a lecture on personality and positive thinking, and so refer to that lecture and revise all these things before you start planning for the interview. But remember, in order to get a call, because you will get a job only when you get a call. And how to get a call? In order to get a call, you have to start from somewhere, and the starting point is building your confidence level. If you build your confidence level, and when you understand the expectations of the recruiters, especially when you are applying for a job, then only you have started the journey. There are certain qualities that are required when you go for the interview. Both before the interview and during the interview, these things are needed. Apart from confidence, they are, the recruiters are trying to gauge your attitude level. We have already had your adaptability level, your aptitude, how you behave, whether you are a team man or not, do you have the team dynamics or team spirit. You have already observed when we were discussing group dynamics how they were also trying to find out who is the leader of this group, and then they also see to it during the interview, they see whether you are clear of your purpose. Do you have the clarity of thought and expression? Can you take decisions? We have talked about how when in a communication situation or they give you a case, how quick or how fast you can take decisions, and whether you have original ideas or approach apart from your subject knowledge. Do you have an innovative mind, and do you possess a cheerful disposition, meaning thereby are you a pleasant person, pleasant in the sense that you should have a sort of nature where you can have the dynamics of mixing with other people so that you can fulfill the task once you are selected for an organization. My dear friends, you can display all these, but you need to get a call, and in order to get a call, you need to start thinking from today, because as Mark Twain says, we should also remember the secret of getting ahead, because through interviews, if many of us want to get jobs, many of us also want to get ahead when we are looking for a promotion. So what is the secret behind? The secret of getting ahead is to get started. So please get started and keep all these things in mind and get ready now to prepare for interview, and we'll see in the next lecture what exactly we mean by planning and by preparing, and how we can prepare a good resume and send so that we may get a call. And when we get the call, how do you respond? So we have several stages, and I shall be discussing very elaborately so that you may not have any problem when you have an interview call and you come back successfully being victorious. Thank you very much.